Success. Success is stumbling from failure to failure with no loss of enthusiasm. Hi everyone, this is Paul Cooper with the Take Note podcast. This is going to be our 5th episode. I'm sorry it should have come out a few weeks ago, but if you've noticed any of my emails and updates on social media, my daughter was actually attacked and bit on the nose by a dog at the playground a few Sundays ago. And so unfortunately things got delayed. She's doing very well now. Looks like she's mainly healed up, just very minimal scarring. So we're very thankful for that. And we really appreciate everyone reaching out to us and giving us your well wishes. But anyways, let's move on. So this is episode 5. It's called the Pittsburgh Beatdown. And it's a brutally honest, non-performing note black eye. Just with about every type of investing, people are going to make it look really rosy, especially if they're trying to sell you something, usually in the form of education. There's really not much risk, or if you know what you're doing, you can mitigate all the risks. And you can mitigate a lot of them, but there's always going to be something. And if someone's telling you that they've never lost money in any type of investing, then 1, they're either lying, or 2, they really haven't done that much investing. So we're going to get into some details here on a note that we just wrapped up. It was almost 2 years that we were in. I think we got into it in either April or May of, 2018. And we just wrapped up everything here at the beginning of March 2020. So almost 2 years. And so that kind of hurts, but we'll get through all the details here, and we're going to show you what went wrong, what we did right, some things that we just really couldn't see or and couldn't know. And then just really want you to have an open world view on all the pitfalls you can have when it comes to non-performing notes, because they're out there and you could end up losing quite a bit of money, and we don't want that. So let's move on and get into the nitty gritty. So here's the setup. This property is located in a solid blue-collar area of Pittsburgh. The homes there are pretty affordable, good rents. The crime was very low, very reasonable. The property was several years delinquent, so that was probably a big red flag that I should have noticed, but we'll get into why I ignored it. But the property was delinquent by several years, and it was occupied, though. It's very important to make sure it's occupied on any of the non-performing assets. We bought it for roughly 20% of the UPB. Looking through the collateral file and at the servicer comments, this is what really made me want to buy this asset. The borrower was, or I guess presumably still is, a landlord. They have several properties and a personal resident. And so that made me happy, because if there's any type of overage or delinquency after we foreclose, then we can sue for the difference and eventually slap judgments on all of the borrower's properties. And I believe when we were buying the property, the borrower had at least 2 rental properties, including this one, in a personal residence. So the unpaid balance was roughly $60,000, I believe. I believe the total payoff was over $100,000, and the home was only worth maybe $50,000 to $60,000 in decent condition. So they definitely owed more than what the home was worth. So they were upside down on it, which was good for us. So an interesting thing going on with this borrower is that they have a lawyer that they use quite extensively. And what the lawyer does is he sends kind of stern, nasty letters to the lenders, whoever holds the note on this property, saying that the mortgage is not valid, that it has this issue, it's already been written off in the courts, blah, 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 cease and desist. And so I'm just looking, I was just like, so what's going on here? The note had been bought and sold several times. I think I was maybe the 5th or 6th person to acquire it. And it looked like all these people the servicers would send out stuff, they'd try to collect, then they'd get a nasty letter from the lawyer, and then they'd immediately try to sell it. I even looked up what their attorney was referencing and couldn't find anything. It's like the mortgage still exists, the note still exists. So that was kind of weird. And so a combination of that and that the borrower is a landlord that's basically been equity skimming. And equity skimming means that they are collecting rent, but they're not paying the mortgage. So they're making money. They're basically using the house as a piggy bank, because they acquired it for basically free, just the closing costs on the mortgage, maybe make a couple payments, then they don't make any more payments. So now it's, they only have to collect a couple rental payments to, be making lots of profit. And so that was kind of weird. So this guy, I don't know how else to say it. The guy's a scumbag. He's a scumbag landlord that's, not doing the right thing. And so going into this, I knew we were going to have to be very stern with him. I'm willing to generally bend over backwards to help people that are trying to do the right thing, and especially them in through a rough patch. That's not this guy. This guy constantly refinances his homes so that he has rentals. He'll tell them, hey, I'm going to do this to upgrade it and I'll refinance it, make it nicer. I'll collect more rent and whatever. And then he doesn't. I knew we were going to be aggressive. We were going to be like, look, you need to start catching up. If you start making payments for a year, then we'll forgive the arrearages, but that's the best deal he was going to get. And just, hey, if we're going to have to foreclose on you and you're not going to deed it back to us or make payments, then we're going all the way. We're going to go for the full amount. We're going to seek the difference, because there will be a difference, and we're going to go slap liens on all of your properties. And so that was our plan. He's either going to pay, or we're going to go after his entire rental portfolio and his personal residence. So let's move on and see what happens next in this bizarre little note odyssey. The Pittsburgh Non-Performer had several issues going on with it. The key one was a legal issue, and it's a legal/title issue. This was one of the first notes that we acquired as a business, as totes of notes. And so we still didn't have a super huge and extensive vendor list yet. And I used a company. It's a large company. If I told you the name, you'd probably heard of them. They do title reviews and title work. Really big one, located in the center of the country. They didn't do a good job for us. And I'm not really that great at reading collateral files. I could probably get better, just I don't have the experience, and I definitely didn't have the experience then. I could tell really, really obvious glaring mistakes and if things were missing, but, small little details that are incorrect, I couldn't tell. This was a problem. What we had here is the legal description on the title was different than the legal description of the physical property. What had happened is the borrower had referenced his primary residence, and so the legal description on this mortgage was for the legal description of his primary residence and not on the actual property he was buying with the mortgage. So that was a mistake by the original title company, and then the collateral reviewers here, they didn't catch that. That ended up being one of the issues that the borrower knew about and their attorney knew about, so they're like, hey, it just doesn't matter, which isn't the case. Mistakes like this happen. That's why you have title insurance, and you can rectify it through legal means if you have to. It can be a pain in the butt, especially if the borrower's fighting it, and that's eventually what happened. The second issue was time. It took forever for the seller to get us all the paperwork. I've bought from these people a couple times. This was the first time I bought from them. I haven't had nearly as big of an issue on the other times I've bought from them, but they're never very quick. It took them 9-ish months to get me the final assignment of mortgage. They got the original collateral file to Madison Management very quickly and to me, but the actual assignment of mortgage from the seller to our company took 9 months. It was just ridiculous. Part of that was my fault. I have to own that. I wasn't nearly as I guess I was just naive, thinking that everyone would want to do the right thing like I do. And I've since learned from them that people probably aren't trying to rip you off, but if it doesn't directly benefit them, they're not going to hustle. They've already got their money, so their incentive is, whatever, we'll get to it when we get to it. And that's why from now on, it's basically, you have to don't be afraid to become a pit bull and get legal involved and threat legal. I don't like having to be that guy. I don't like having to be an asshole. But at some point, you have to do it. You can't let these people walk all over you. And so then I finally got them on the phone. I had to call the office and leave several voicemails with that president several times to finally get them to get it done. And then it got done. And then I was able to get it recorded. So, it took almost 9 to 10 months just to get that recorded. And here's the thing, if that's not recorded, it's going to be pretty hard to foreclose. So during that whole time, we were reaching out to the borrower, trying to get special servicing to work, see if we could work out anything. And just could not get in contact. Stuff would become returned or we'd just never hear anything. Yeah, I think it was at the 4 or 5 month mark that we sent out a door knocker to see if anyone was home. And lo and behold, it looks like no one's home. He looks through the window, it's all cleaned out. And so it looks like the renters that were in there were no longer in there. So I sent out a property preservation company to secure the property since we thought it had been abandoned. And we'll get to that later because they found out some interesting things for us. And that kind of got the ball rolling, and we finally got contact with the borrower, and we'll get to that. And so as we talked earlier here, another big issue is the borrowers just equity skimming, didn't really care about the property at all, and just wanted to get their money, which also led to the property needing some repairs. It wasn't, from the street it looked pretty good, but we found out later on it needed fairly extensive repairs. And the other issue is he wasn't keeping up with his taxes, so he's a few $1,000s behind on that. So let's get into some more detail about some of these issues. So we hinted at that it needed extensive repairs. Here's a bid list from Sandcastle, their property preservation company that we've used, of the services that they thought needed to be done. So, most of them just a couple $100s here and there, a little bit of maintenance for the lawn, debris, things like that. Front porch, toilet. But then you see a few expensive ones. So if you look right here, almost $3,700 for mold removal. And that was in the basement. It's got an old stone foundation where a little bit of water was leaking in and it caused some mold. And so that needed to be done. Same here with the interior repair, the $600 below it, that's for the mold. And then, but most of the other stuff's not too bad. Siding, they needed a little bit of siding replaced. And so nothing too terrible. The roof was also towards probably the end of its lifetime, and they're saying it probably needed a roof tarp. But nothing crazy besides the mold. But let's get to the pictures that they sent me. That's a nice thing. If you get a property preservation company, they document like crazy. It'll take a bunch of pictures for you. So this is why I use Dickie Baldwin. These 4 pictures here are from, this one's a Google Street View from the front. And then these other 3 are from the realtor that I finally convinced to go out there and take pictures for me. This is kind of that courtroom view. So here's a little parking lot, and there's some businesses back over that way. And then here's the home. This is the home here. And then this is just a picture of the other side of the street. So it's a decent little street. And it looks good. There's a bunch of stuff out here on the front lawn. And so what we think is these were the people, the renters moved out roughly around the time that the realtor went there. And so it probably was vacant several months before we finally figured that out. But if you look from their pictures, the place doesn't look that bad. Unfortunately, if the person had been a little bit more motivated and more thorough, they would have walked down this parking lot and looked at the backside. But he was pretty lazy, and this is all we got. And so this is why I use Dickie Baldwin, because we're about to expose some pictures that the property preservation company took that would have really made me reconsider buying this property. So here we go. This isn't even close to being all the pictures I have. These are just the main ones. So the property preservation company, yep. So it was basically the 4-month mark is when they went out there. So we probably sent someone at the 3rd month or the 3-month mark to knock on the door. And so this was the siding that was cited in their quote. Not super bad, but if the realtor had walked all the way around and taken these pictures, I would have definitely faded my bid, if not just canceled it. Again, not too bad, but this kind is kind of indicative of what you can expect to be on the rest of the property. If the exterior isn't being maintained enough to be watertight, then you can generally safely bet that the interior probably needs some work too. And this is the front porch here. Just the stairs are old and need to be replaced. Nothing too bad. Let's move on and see what else they found out for us. Yeah. So don't get too grossed out. Shouldn't be poop. That's just sewage. Well, maybe it kind of is because it was sewage that backed up and just sat in there and it wasn't cleaned for months on end. So here we've got some ceiling issues. This part hasn't been patched and this part has. And so that was making the property preservation company think that the roof needed to be replaced and at least have a tarp on it. The bathroom's very basic. This picture is obviously gross, but it was just a basic bathroom. The rest of it was fine, just needed to be cleaned. There was debris in the home, some personal items that needed to be removed. Carpet probably needed to be replaced or at the very least professionally cleaned. Nothing too terrible. I mean, I know this looks gross and stuff, but honestly, that's as long as the home is watertight and, being protected from the elements, this is just basic cosmetic stuff. That's not too bad. I got a bunch of pictures of the basement. These two are, pretty indicative of it. So as you can see here, the basement's damp. It's not watertight. There was water coming around the edges, and so that was causing the mold buildup. And so basically, everything down here needed to be pulled away. It needed to be pressure cleaned to destroy the mold, and then it needed to be sealed up so no more water would come in. And I also had some pictures of the guys. They actually brought in a mold meter to test for mold. They don't just do a visual inspection. So that was pretty cool that, they don't just tell you, oh, it's mold and you need work done. And their prices a lot of time for preservation companies can be quite high comparatively. But at the same time, if you don't want to have to hunt for contractors and people to get stuff done in cities that you don't live in, you may just want to do it because, again, they do a great job of documenting everything, and they most property preservation companies really stand by what they do, and so definitely use them if you have any properties you need to secure, possibly need to do work on. And another little advanced tip you can do is use property preservation companies to go out there and look at the property before you buy. Now, you have to be careful. You got to let them know that you don't own it yet so they don't go on there and get some type of trespassing against them. But they can be pretty experienced and get you some pictures. Again, though, like I said, this is why I use Dickie. His realtors do a really good job of trying to take pictures. They can't always take pictures from the back just because you would be trespassing on a neighbor's property going through the yard. But I was kind of disappointed that the realtor on this one, I guess technically he did get out of his car and he probably walked 20 to 30 feet, but it could have saved me some trouble if he'd walked another 50 feet and taken pictures from the back. So the question is, what happened? Did we all live happily ever after? And we kind of did. I wouldn't say happily ever after, but we're definitely not sad. And we were able to kind of pull this one out of the gutter. So again, lots of issues. Hostile borrower's attorney, the issue with the title, with the legal description. The house is not in good repair. We secured it, and then a month or two later, the borrower calls our servicer and calls Sandcastle all pissed off because they want to get access to their property, and they give him the code to get in because the locks were changed and he had a lockbox up, and you have to, whenever you go in and secure something, the preservation company will post all these notices. They'll put a lockbox on, and if someone shows up and they should have rightful access to the property, they can call these numbers and get that information and get that swinging. And so the borrower was pissed, and then their attorney sends us letters and is all pissed off. I was like, hey, we did everything by the book. Like, the preservation company, the door knocker said it was abandoned. It looked abandoned and vacant. You guys aren't responding. They posted everything appropriately. You've got access. And so we finally get the title information sorted out and recorded shortly a month or two after this, because I didn't want to initiate foreclosure until that was sorted out, because the borrower would be able to weasel out of it, especially with their lawyer. So we finally got that done. We pull the trigger. I hire a law firm out of, I believe they're in Philadelphia, and they handle Pittsburgh or they handle Pennsylvania and some of the surrounding states, and so they go to work. Now, Pennsylvania has about a year-long foreclosure timeline, and at this point, we were probably in it for about 9 months, maybe 10 or 11 before we were able to initiate foreclosure. So we're already into it for a year. So that's a decent amount of time to already be involved. And unfortunately, we hadn't made the progress that I would have liked to have made. Because in a good situation that would be more realistic is, okay, maybe it takes 3 months to get all the paperwork transferred and onboarded before you're making borrower contact, and maybe you spend 2 months trying to get them sorted out, and then maybe you spend another month sending people out there, and then maybe at the 6-month mark is when you're like, okay, we're done, we're going to foreclose. And then it takes a year long to foreclose, and so you're looking at about 18 months. That'd be a pretty normal timeline for a state and jurisdiction that has a year long foreclosure. Well, we had to basically add 6 months on because of issues before we could even start it. So that means it's going to be almost 2 years just to go through the full foreclosure, assuming that they fight it every step of the way. Well, we had other issues because the legal description was messed up. The borrower knew about it. The borrower's attorney knew about it. So they were fighting it, trying to say that it was, it wasn't valid. And it's like, well, no, that's not quite how it works. So we were going through the foreclosure process, and the way it was going to work is either the judge was going to let us do it and note that and get it changed, or they were going to say that we have to go get it changed, and then we'd have to do some title action afterwards, which could take even longer, could add another 6 months to a year on. So it's like, well, geez, we could have potentially been into that for 3 years just in legal stuff, which would be terrible. And so we started looking into the original title insurance policy. And of course, we didn't have the entire title insurance policy. It wasn't even included at all. However, on the HUD-1 statement, it did indicate that we had title insurance, so we had to reach out to the original title insurance company to get that policy information. They make it super hard. There's no one to call. It's all done through an email, and you have to figure out roughly on their chart what you need, send a check, and submit everything. And if you mess up, you got to start it all over and write them another check. So it's a complete and utter scam that some of these title companies do because they don't want to pay out. But they'll do it if on these older loans that they've done. I think it's usually 5 years or older, and this one was originated back in 2006. Generally, you're not going to need to make a claim 10 plus years down the road, but we needed to, so we had to go through that. Finally got that information. I think that took about 2 months to get. Let the attorneys know they had a good, great. Because if the judge had come back and said that we needed to do quiet title work, that would have been really expensive. I think I was originally quoted for Pennsylvania about $3,500 to $5,000 for a foreclosure, which is on the higher end, just because Pennsylvania is a little bit more expensive, but not unreasonable. But I think the title work would have been at least another $7,000 to $10,000. I mean, that would have been really, really expensive. And we were into this deal, all in all, for $25,000. So that would have been really expensive to have to do that. Not to mention that would have added probably another 6 months to a year on. So it was becoming a real nightmare there. And so I decided to have our attorneys float by a settlement offer to the borrower, because they made it abundantly clear they weren't going to do the right thing. They were going to drag this out as long as possible. And we were going to win. I mean, I guess there's always a small percentage that the judge could do something crazy. But we would eventually win. But it's how long and how much money are you going to spend to be right? Because at the end of the day, this wasn't my money. This was an investor's money. And so I needed to protect their capital as well as possible. And if I couldn't make the money, at least get as much out as possible so they can move on and do something else. And so I started floating by some offers. And I think originally we started at $45,000 or $50,000. The UPB was $60,000. The total payoff was almost $120,000. So that was a decent discount, a 25% discount. And then we just slowly worked down from there. Then they offered back something stupid, I think like $10,000 or $15,000. So I finally gave my attorneys a drop dead price, that had a little bit of profit built in. And I was going to give all the profit to my investor. I'd spoken to my investor several times. I told him, look, I'm not even interested in taking any sort of profit on this. Whatever profit we can get, I want to get to you for your time. And we just need to move on. And it's not going to be a loss, but the expression, cut your losses comes to mind. And so he agreed, and they hemmed and hawed, and then they, I think about a month or so later, they finally agreed to it. And I think that's when they found out that we weren't going to stop, and we had just got the title insurance information, and so we were going to be making a claim through title insurance. And so what happens when you do that is the title insurance company is responsible for making all the payments to make it right. And so at that point, it would cost us time, but it wouldn't cost us any more money. So if we had to drop $10,000 on getting the title changed, we're not personally paying that. The title insurance company was. So I think the borrower's attorney counseled him to realize that, hey, we're not going away. And if they either need to give the property back or they need to give us some type of settlement. And so they agreed to our price. And then that took several months, and we finally got it at the end of February. We're all wrapped up now, and so we're done. I actually sent my JV partner their money back plus a little bit of the profit. I kept a little bit of it because we have to do taxes real quick, and then they'll get the remainder. And so we're virtually done. We're done with that borrower. It was a nightmare of a situation. Just it was a bunch of different things. But here's the really interesting part, and this is what I had my attorney bring up to him. The property wasn't in good condition. If everything was decent, the home probably could have sold for 50 to 60,000. If it'd been, updated, then yeah, 60 to 70. But as is, maybe 35 to 40. And so it needed work because it needed a roof, it needed the siding, it needed that mold remediation and everything else. And the borrower wasn't doing it. And the borrower couldn't put a renter in there until they at least did some of this stuff. So that was kind of weird. So it's my thing is if you had a property, why would you let it just go to disrepair if you had the money to fix it up, and then because then you could either sell it or you could rent it out. And he didn't. And then he owed several years worth of taxes on it. Not an insane amount, but I think it was getting to be like $7,000 or $8,000. Not an insignificant amount at all. Approaching 5 figures. And so if you put the repairs together plus that, he needed at least $20,000. And so I just thought it was weird that the borrower was able to come up with the money that they had to come up with to settle with us, but they didn't just use that money to pay off the taxes and get the place fixed so then they could put a renter in there. So the whole thing was really odd, but who knows what this borrower's got going on. He had at least 3 properties that I knew of. If he had any companies or anything else, he could have had a lot more assets that he was doing it from. So that was kind of weird. He came up with a settlement for us, even though he's letting his property go to disrepair. Fought us the whole way. Like I said, just a nightmare of a situation. Very similar to if you've either owned rentals or know someone who has, when you get some type of tenant that really knows how to work the system. And, they get in, everything's good, and then you collect 1 or 2 months rent, and then they fight you, and they get like a year's worth of free rent out of you before you finally get kicked out. The whole point of this was to let you know some of the pitfalls you can have. The main ones you're going to come across are collateral issues, not being able to get in contact with the borrower, legal issues with the borrower and their attorney, and then the property not being worth what it should be or not being taken care of and things like that. So it can really add up. And these delays make your carrying costs increase drastically so we had to pay almost 2 years worth of special servicing, which is not cheap, especially from Madison. I think they're $60 to $90 a month, depending on what you need. So that added up. I always account for at least 1.5 years of special servicing. And then the legal fees added up because everything getting delayed, the title issues. I eventually had to have a different collateral file company, the one that I use now, go in and find all the issues, and we were able to get that fixed. But yeah, just the time value of money really worked against us in this investment. So one, I didn't get any profits on this. This was, I made sure to give all the profits to the investor. This was a learning experience for me. So that's my payment. And honestly, I was starting to think there that I was going to have to come out of pocket to make my investor whole. I'm not legally responsible to or required to. It's what I would do. If I could make an investor whole, even if just a bunch of weird things happened, that's what I would try to do. And so I was pretty worried there, and my investor was getting worried, but we got it taken care of. He's financed out, and so I want you to know that it's not all sunshine and roses. Non-performing notes are a fairly risky investment, even if you know what you're doing. There's just, you never know when you're going to buy that alligator, because from what I had from my realtor, the property looked good. The original collateral reviewer told me the collateral file was good. What am I supposed to think then? I'm supposed to, go against the professionals and be like, oh no, this property's no good. So I want to let you know you can do everything right and still get some black eyes, bumps and bruises, lose some teeth over stuff. And that's another reason why, if you're investing in non-performing notes, you want to buy several. Don't ever just buy one, because it could be a home run, or it could be just a horrible deal like this one almost was. And, again, luckily my investor got a little bit of money for their time and we were able to get his money out. But, we potentially could have lost money on this deal. And so you don't want to ever get into just one non-performing note. That's why I tell people get at least 3 or at the, honestly, I'd say 5 to 10 if you can afford it. Just because, one of them may be a dud, one of them's probably going to be a home run, and then one or two more will be base hits, so that can counter the losses that you may get on the one or two bad ones, because they are out there. There'll be assets that aren't worth throwing money at anymore. You'll find out after you get it that it's not worth the money and the time. If you have to prolonged legal battle, then that's going to cost you money and it's going to cost you time, and it's probably not worth it on if the asset's only worth like $20,000, because you find out that it needs all this work. So having a little bit of diversity in your portfolio pays, and that would be through having more assets. But anyways, I don't want to keep rambling on. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope I didn't gross you out too much here, but I really wanted to give you an honest look at what can happen with non-performing notes, or really with any type of real estate investing. There can be a lot of potential issues. And so I want you to steel yourself against those before you invest. Realize that they could happen, because nothing's worse than getting into some new type of investment and not having your eyes open. But anyways, if you have any questions or comments, don't hesitate to reach out to me. If you have any suggestions on what you'd like us to cover in the near future, let us know.